So I read in the summary part that the book also contains how to become the Arya division theory, right? So, if you study about the freedom fighters, some of them all have also claimed to be in support of this theory. For example, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, they were in support of the Arya division theory. And when you try to debate on these topics with people who are from other communities or who are in support of these figures, and how do you explain this to the masses without them getting very much, aggressive? Because this is a very, I would say, a crucial topic, which is also very controversial.
Thank you. I'll try and answer that. So the question is about the Aryan invasion theory and how do we talk about it or refute it when people get upset about it because people's understanding of their ancestry and their memory of their ancestral experiences of indigeneity or oppression are all connected to this theory. So when I have a chapter in this book. So the first half of the book, I'll give you first a context of how I talked about it in the book and what little more I have learned since then. In this book, the first part is called Deshakala Dosha. It is sort of my attempt to critique the American Academy's understanding of Indian history and Hinduism, largely as using Wendy Doniger's book, The Hindus and Alternative History. And I remember at that time, 2013-14, there was a lot of controversy about that book because someone in India had gone to court and briefly the court banned the book. But ultimately, the book is back. I think by 2015, it was being sold in every bookshop in India. I could see it. But in those few months, Dr. Doniger became a celebrity. Well, she was already very famous, but then she became even more famous for supposedly rescuing the oppressed people of India, the lower caste, quote unquote, from what she would call the dead Brahmin male hegemony. So I read this book at that time, mainly to try and understand where she is coming from. What is her premise? Why is she calling it alternative history? So in academia, particularly in critical cultural studies or critical media studies, which is the tradition I was trained in, the word alternative means something that is coming from the non-mainstream, the non-dominant position. Now, if somebody says Dr. Doniger is advancing the point of view of Dalits and Adivasis and women, so it's alternative. On the face of it, you would say yes, these are the people who have suffered so much, who are in the ranks of the poor, all these things. So on the face of it, you would say yes. But then if you looked at the structure of what she is saying, then you realize it's more complicated. First of all, the argument she makes is very different to very similar to what the British and the German colonial Indologists said. It's no different at all. And it is very similar to what was being taught in the Indian textbooks or in the California textbooks. So what she's saying is actually, in a way, not the alternative, but the mainstream one. Second, it is also a question of influence and power. Now, Wendy Doniger is a first-world academic. She gets to write her side of the story in New York Times, in the world press. And I remember one interview where somebody was talking about how she is marginalized and things like that, whereas the Sanskrit pundits who taught her, who came on a cycle to teach her, were privileged patriarchal males. So again, I was thinking, here is an American academic with a lot of privilege, and then she is being presented as being the subaltern, whereas some Brahmin pundit who came on a bicycle in Varanasi or wherever is being presented as the oppressor. So in many ways, I thought this alternative, dominant terminology was not accurate in academia, so that is one thing I wrote. Now moving specifically to issue of the Aryan invasion theory. In this book, I was not yet familiar with a lot of the scholarly refutations, whether it is Konrad Ernst or Shrikant Pellegrini, and since then, of course, there have been other books by Tony Joseph and others. So this argument is going to keep going on and on, whether it is linguistics or archaeology or genetics and so on. So I'm not an expert in all these cutting-edge fields. So what I did in this book, which I think will still be useful to many of you, is I tried to look at the way we tell stories about ourselves. How do human beings imagine our own ancestors, our own past, our sense of home? So there's a great scholar, sociologist, called Abiatar Zerubbabel. My father used to be a fan of his work. He's a sociologist in America. And he's written some amazing books on cultural memory. So one of his books, he says, everybody says Obama is the first black president because he's half black. How come nobody says Obama is the first half-white president? So it's just the way cultures think about origins. That is the point he's trying to make. So what has happened is, in Bharat, this is how I understand it now, we have one of the longest traditions of connection with our ancestral past. So you can call it jati or varna or caste or what you will, these are all later terms I feel. But very simply, most people are very connected to what their parents did or grandparents did in terms of the relationship to the divine. It could be a particular deity, a Grama Devata or a Kula Devata. It could be a pilgrimage. It could be a particular craft or art they knew. So there has been this vertical transmission, this vertical intergenerational continuity which has existed for a long time. And my current view is that all over the world, propaganda has broken that continuity. It happened in Europe, in the Middle East, it happened in Europe, it has happened everywhere on earth except in India. So, in a way, when we talk about Hinduism, we all know it's an inadequate word, that label. We talk about Sanatana Dharma. I think the key point is Sanatana, and that is, what is the sense of time we are aware of? So, in a way, it's very simple for me. The way I would suggest people think about the Aryan invasion theory is, did your parents or grandparents tell you that the God that created you is in Turkey or in Uzbekistan? No. The God that I'm told my father and his father went to and walked up the hill 7 times in their life is Tirupati Balaji, for example, or Panduranga or Udupi Krishna. So this idea that some Western scholars 200 years ago who were trying to fit everything in the world into their theory, into their book, know better than us what our sense of past and belonging is, I think is false. So, to get to the second part about how do we talk to people who are hurt, who are genuinely feeling pain, I think in this book, I kind of say that my critique of Hinduphobia is largely a critique of the Western narrative, the Western discourse on our history. And when it comes to caste, I prefer to look at it very, very carefully. And my knowledge was limited then. Now I think I know a little bit more, largely from reading Vishwa Adluri's book, The New Science, which tells us, for example, that when Indian politics revolves around demonizing or hating the Brahmin, it is because 200-300 years ago, the first German scholars who translated our scriptures were projecting their hatred for Jewish rabbis and Catholic priests onto the figure or the trope of the Brahmin. If you read S.N. Balgangadhara's work, if you read the work of Sophia Patan and Duncan Jalki and some of his researchers, you will see that a lot of the assumptions in Indian social science and in Indian politics are actually false. But how do we refute them when people's memories are already filled with certain assumptions? I think we just have to do it very carefully and respectfully, without denying anybody's sense of pain, just pointing out the facts. I mean, the last 8 months while I was traveling in Andhra Pradesh, everywhere I went, the traffic would be stopped because thousands of buses would come because the leader of Andhra Pradesh then was having a political rally. Okay, and I wrote a piece in the print in January saying about the lords of democracy. So actually, whatever Indian politicians or Indian social scientists or Wendy Doniger says about Brahmins, you could actually say about Indian political elites today. Okay, many of them at least. Who are the billionaires? You take the 10 or 20 richest people in India or the world. Where are the Brahmins there? Okay. So when you look at the poor, yes, you do see an overlap between caste and class. I'm not denying that. But the moment you get into these tropes, the demonization of Brahmins as if they are the richest and most powerful and most violent people in the world, when most of the caste violence in India is actually not done by Brahmins. That is one point. Second, when people cling to this myth of an invasion, that somehow, because some people pray to certain gods in certain ways, we have to treat them the way white people in America are expected to behave for genociding the Native Americans. As somebody put it, Hindus are expected to have white guilt without white privilege. So the last anecdote I want to mention on this, sorry, I hope I'm not going too long. One of my friends, my old classmates, very successful engineering, corporate guy. I think he was like an economic right-winger for a while. Then he became like a total, what today people call woke. I don't know why. He lives in America. One day he got into an argument with me in some school WhatsApp group. And he was upset with me that I was criticizing Wendy Doniger. So I said, have you read Rearming Hinduism? And he said, yeah, but you didn't understand Wendy Doniger. I said, okay, you tell me what she's trying to do. And this is exactly what my friend, who is like a actual privileged guy, says. He says Wendy Doniger's book is meant to teach Brahmins and upper caste people in India how to behave better with their servants. So I'm sorry, that is how messed up this American academic culture is. You have the richest, most privileged, most clueless people picking up on it and spewing these cliches. Whereas the rest of us are actually trying to understand, through reason and logic, what is what. So, sorry, long answer, but I hope it's useful.
So there is a program and support from the government and Indian knowledge system. And being in the academia, I also understand that there is a problem that we all are running behind language which is not of our motherland. There are like 22 scheduled languages which are the matrabhashas of all the Bharatiyas. What is the effect of English in the academia if we are talking about the return of Indian intelligence in the future, and how we are going to bring back the knowledge in the matrabhashas of Bharat, and how, what will be the effect if we are not actually bringing our languages in the academia, especially in the research. Like the work, you cannot publish any kind of work, you cannot access any kind of work, whatever is there, the manuscript in Sanskrit, everybody is trying to translate in English. So what will happen in the future? What is the scope of these languages? Now people are not actually teaching these languages to their own kids. And the culture will survive through the words. That was, you said, the Shakti of word. So the words will be spoken in a language. And the language should be of this land. Then only the knowledge will be transferred, which will be of this land. Otherwise, we will always be under the influence of those who have left in 1947.
Yeah, Dhanyavad. మీ ప్రశ్న వెంటే నాకు తెలుగులో మాట్లాడాలన్నది. I could try Hindi, but my Hindi is very Hyderabadi and funny, so I get self-conscious. But I assure you, I speak in English, but I feel like I'm just a Telugu person, so through and through. And I think the immediate answer I feel like saying is, हम English से किधर छुपाएंगे? Where do we hide? Right? There is no place to hide. I tell you why. It's not about reaching the foreigner or impressing him. We are going to need English to reach our children. That is how it is becoming increasing. So maybe in 2-3 generations, अंग्रेजी का कोई जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगा शायद. Who knows? Maybe India will become fully indigenous language. I don't know. But you see the arguments in the politics, right? The last few years, my home state, Andhra Pradesh, was again under the rule of a chief minister who wanted to remove our native language. Now, 20-30 years ago, when N.T. Ramarao Garu became our chief minister, he loved language, right? He was not quote-unquote a Brahmin, but he acted as our gods. He believed in the Sanskriti, and he, made sure in his movies he brought out the beauty of Bhasha. Now we had a situation where a chief minister is adopting this argument that English is the future or English is egalitarian. So a lot of people are making that argument that English is more egalitarian and people can escape caste system if there is English. So I think it is going to be very difficult to escape English, but it is going to be very, very difficult to have a future as who we are without at least one Matrubhasha. Okay? So that is very, very important. I'm very grateful. At home, I always spoke Telugu with my mother. My father and I spoke English most of the time, but my father wrote poetry in English and Telugu. Now, so what I feel is very important is everyone needs to be equipped. I have a feeling that my friend who did not understand Wendy Doniger and probably accepted what she said about the Sanskrit words, I have a feeling he has forgotten Kannada and Telugu or whatever Indian languages he knew. I think he is so used to speaking in English, he can be fooled. So what you're saying is a real concern. I fully agree with that. Now, to answer the first part of your question about Indic knowledge systems, the little I have seen is that the template in which it is being taught. I attended a Sanskrit conference in Pune a few months ago. Some of the scholars were speaking in fluent Sanskritam. I could understand very little of what they're saying because they're already part of a great literature, a great tradition of debate in Sanskrit. But many of us could not understand it. So that is also one challenge. Now, some other presenters were speaking about Sanskrit literature but in English, which I could understand. But then I could see the problem. They are just fitting a Western European social scientific worldview into ours, our knowledge, our words, our sensibilities. So I feel this Indian knowledge systems, it's a great initiative, no doubt, but it needs more. There is something missing that will connect the knowledge of our ancestors with the knowledge and needs of our descendants. Okay? So at the moment, Indian knowledge systems is, I think, runs the risk of just becoming Western social science with some Hindi or Sanskrit words. Okay? So I think one way to escape this dilemma, I would like to recommend a book. It's called Names of Gods by Ram Swarup. I think when we read that, whether we speak English or Sanskritam or Telugu or Tamil, we will treat the word as sacred, and that is the need of the hour.
Namaste. I would like to ask a question. There has been a talk on correcting our history textbooks, and BJP government now it's the third term. But why didn't they rectify the textbooks, the history textbooks, or set the right narrative in the last two terms? I know the question has been political, but it should have been done, because for generations we have been taught wrong history, and that is forming our mass consciousness. Like the Aryan invasion theory, or we are not being taught about the Rashtrakoot or the Chola. We are not taught about the Ahams. We are only taught about the Mughals and the Delhi Sultanate. So why haven't they changed the history? Can you enlighten us on that?
So, thank you for that question. I share your pain in two continents. I share the pain of Hindu parents in two continents, both in India and in America. In America, I was a part of that effort to get them to change the textbooks, but there is so much politics that comes into the writing of history textbooks in particular. It's very, very difficult to do it without absolute determination from, let's say, the government. And I think in India, I mean, I'll backtrack a bit. In 2016, when the California history textbook review was taking place, there was already concern that, they were teaching absolute nonsense about Hinduism. There was a textbook in the state of North Carolina where the ancient India lesson said Hinduism, and there was a picture of Hitler saying Aryan. So that's how bad the textbooks were. 2016 in California, they removed the curriculum committee, the Department of Education removed the name of India itself. They said there was no India before 1947. Everything is South Asia. So we tried to fight that. We got smeared. It was a big mess. We got some gains, but overall, they have been moving that narrative everywhere. There was no India before 1947, and now that has come to Indian politics also. A lot of opposition parties are seeing that. As for the ruling party, which has ruled, or at least been in office for 10 years, and hopefully will be there another 5 years, I think. So, right? 2 terms. 2016 itself, I remember speaking to friends about how this was something that had to be done, because almost everybody I met in India who was reading my book was saying it's time to change. 1 year passes, 2 years, 5 years, second term comes. Around 2019, I remember, or 20, the Minister for Education gives a statement saying, we have not changed a word of the textbooks. Now, a few months ago, I happened to pick up the NCERT history books and also NCERT civics books. And the last couple of months, I've been actually focusing on the civics books for my analysis. Now, I recently wrote a article in First Post about the NCERT civics books and how it teaches about inequality. And it goes back to your question also. And it's very simple. In NCERT, children are taught in a very effective way with cartoons about how 2 domestic workers are going to war with their employer, Mr. and Mrs. Jane. And the whole story shows how Mr. and Mrs. Jane are rich and have a lot of privileges and these people don't, which is true. I mean, economic inequality is a fact. But then, the textbook is not teaching children, as any good social scientist should, about the real parameters of inequality. It is not talking about the fact that in America, post-1980s, the wage gap between the lowest end worker and the highest end worker, the CEO, went from about 50-fold to 400 or 500-fold. Same thing. Nobody talks about Bill Gates or George Soros in talking about inequality. They will talk about Mr. and Mrs. Jane, or they will talk about some Brahmin, Pujari, as if they are the George Soros and Bill Gates of the world. So the inequality discourse is flawed, and that frankly has been extremely damaging to how children think about society, and also to parents and their inability to talk to children about what is going on in the world to their children. Yes, the parents need social science. I tell you what I've noticed in the last, a lot of, I would say some parents are like my friend, who thinks that we need Wendy Doniger to learn how to talk to people in India, you know, who are less fortunate or less economically privileged. But then there are a lot of parents who will read books like this, or who will read books by Shree Ayyappa or Anand or
Narayan Murthy had given $1 million to Sheldon Pollock.
Yes, sir.
You know, might be knowing better what Sheldon Pollock does.
No, there is a problem with wealth. It's the entire concern, I would say, 99% of people who are concerned about the future of our temples, the future of our Punya Kshetras, our cows, our nature, our trees, our rivers, are not the Narayan Murthis or the other billionaires. It is just very simple, ordinary middle class people, people who go to Sabrimala, for example, who are working class people, you know. The same people Wendy Doniger says she is saving from the Brahmins are the people who are protecting our gods. So, history textbooks, I don't know why they are not changed, because I'm not a member of the government.
I feel you have been doing a great service. Actually, a lot of people, adults, or even teenagers or youngsters, they read books by authors like you.
Thank you.
And that is bringing a kind of enlightenment or awakening or setting the right narrative. Like you had put in Sai Deepak, Anand Ranganathan. So I think so. Because actually, these are becoming more popular literature, more popular or easily accessible information. Otherwise, textbooks is just being taught to school or college students. Whereas the book you have written will be kind of read by people of all strata, of all age group, all walks of life.
Thank you, sir. Parents are the best teachers.
Yeah.
And I tell
Rather
you
the
what,
first teachers. The first teachers
yes.
to a kid.
Yes, yeah.
Sir, my question to you is, after reading whole part of it, but there was a question to my mind is this: how the misrepresentation of Hinduism is been done during an academic session and the media part? Say, like for example, while you were making a movie, during your conference time, I have gone through with it. It was said that a Slumdog Millionaire being a propaganda movie for it. How it can be changed? How it can be tackle the situation? Can you be elaborate on this one?
A very good question. Okay. What are the nuances in terms of misrepresentation of Hinduism in academia?
Academic and media.
Media.
And second was, apart from that media part of it, say like for example, movies which are being made as nowadays, is been criticizing in Hinduism. Example, being a propaganda. For example, during a conversation you have used that a Slumdog Millionaire being a propaganda, a movie is being used. That is how I can elaborate on this point.
Thank you. I'll elaborate. So, the book I'm working on at the moment, I'm working on a couple of books. One of them is on the history of propaganda. And I've come to the conclusion that, you know, this is each scholar can unpack a phenomenon through his or her field the best. So a Sanskrit scholar can unpack something in history through language, a historian through history. For me, as a media studies researcher, it is a study of communication and persuasion and propaganda that helps me understand a lot of problems. So, there's a lot of literature. Oh, you're there. Okay, yeah. So there is a lot of literature in the Western humanities and social sciences on propaganda. In fact, the greatest book written on propaganda is George Orwell's 1984. And I should actually thank George Orwell and a student in my 1984 class. So recently, my friend Rekha Rao Garu in Bangalore, who runs a blog called Hindu Parenting, which I recommend highly for all Hindu parents and teenagers to check out, wanted me to teach a class on the novel. Because she said, look, a lot of people are teaching about Ramayana and Mahabharata, and that's all wonderful, but nobody is teaching about the Western worldview, or the Western social science, or Western humanities. So I said I can teach a class to Indian students about one of the greatest classics which explains Western society, and that is about 1984. And it was a student in 1984 who happens to be an alum of IITB for me, who insisted I should come and teach or give a talk today. So anyway, I'm talking about propaganda as something other scholars have studied, and the key point to remember is it is very systematic. So in a propaganda society, a society where the rulers have understood the power of communication to keep people under their control, things are very well coordinated. So academia, journalism, popular culture will always say the same thing, or they will at least overlap, or even if they change the appearance of what they're saying, they will still say the same thing. For example, from the 1700s till about the 1960s or 70s, Western academia, Western foreign policy experts, politicians, journalists would all say that Hinduism is a weak, vegetarian, effeminate religion. And that is why America should support Pakistan. This is documented. Andrew Rotter's book, Comrades at Odds, Great Political Science History. Now, suddenly, they say the problem with Hindutva is hyper-masculinity. Anand Patwardhan's film, for example, Father, Son and Holy War. Now they say that there is a problem with Hinduism. Now they will just say the problem with Hinduism is hyper-masculinity. So, that is propaganda for you. They will never let go of the lie. They will change the appearance. So, to answer your question about Slumdog Millionaire, it's a great question. See, when the movie first came out, I thought there was something fishy, or at least coincidental, that a movie which depicts Hindus as evil and horrible comes out the same time that there is a terrorist attack, which is being justified by Arundhati Roy and a bunch of other people as poor, oppressed Muslims trying to get social justice from rich, capitalistic Hindus. And a lot of people criticized one of the things that they did in terms of propaganda in the movie. The novel Q&A by Vikas Swaroop did not isolate any one community for blame. Because a character, I think the hero in the novel, his name was Ram Mohammed Thomas. So he was like Amar Akbar Anthony, he was like every man, Indian multiculturalism. But in the movie, they made him Jamal. And almost all the bad guys are Hindu, right? And from the cop to, of course, Anil Kapoor, the quizmaster. So that you could say arguably is propaganda. Then the other thing you could also say might be propaganda, and it's hard to prove, of course, is the coordination and the timing. The academia is saying that capitalism and Hindutva are one. Journalists are saying that 26/11 attacks took place because Indians are so rich. Slumdog Millionaire is saying that, Hindus are like Anil Kapoor's character in Slumdog Millionaire. They are deceiving, deceptive, greedy. They don't think that poor people deserve money, etc., etc. So, I think the key point about analyzing propaganda is as follows. When you sense that a particular movie or a news article or an argument is lying to you, don't jump onto Twitter with the first lie or inconsistency or illogic you found, okay? Because they are used to dealing with logical arguments. They have billions of dollars in foundations given sometimes by people like Mr. Narayan Murthy, for example, to Mr. Sheldon Pollock, who argue that, all over the world, colonialism means the colonized people are victims, we must sympathize with them. Colonizers are oppressors, except in India. Except in India, the Brahmins are the colonizers, not the white Europeans. So the last point I want to say about detecting propaganda accurately is, don't look for the most obvious things, look for the most subtle and most compelling explanation. So for example, Slumdog Millionaire, one explanation is they changed the names of the character. That's a very good explanation of propaganda evidence of it. But I think the biggest issue in Slumdog Millionaire is not that it depicted poverty in India. It doesn't matter, they always do that. The biggest problem is they depicted wealth in India as a Brahminical Hindu conspiracy. So that is the key point. I'll take more questions. Sorry.
Hello sir, my name is Mahadevan. I am a student of Vedanta. I am doing my masters in Hindu studies. I have not read your book, so apologies. I assure you I will study. I will read through soon. We started this very enriching session with the power of the word. The MC was talking about the Vakya Shakti. And I remembered from the Rig Veda, the Vak Sukta, where Bhagavad talks about the power of the word and says the entire creation comes from a particular word, and the entire destruction also will take place because of the word. So the power of the word, from there, I just wanted to carry forward what we said. Now you are proficient in the language of words. So, as a professor yourself, the problem that we are going to be Hindus are going to, we are a very structured society. Our ancient history was completely structured. Our knowledge system was structured. Everything was structured. The Vedic, Puranic, the entire Shruti, Smriti, everything is structured. Then they cut to medieval history. We had the Arabs coming, a bunch of hordes. We did not know how to deal with it. We were at loss. Cut to present time, even today we are at loss. We do not know how to counter the West. We don't know how to counter the Islamists. We don't know how to counter the leftists. We do not know, and that's why we are probably just getting our hands here and there. But post 2014, we have started seeing a whole generation of writers and authors like you who have come across and started showing a way to the masses. And so thank you for that. And we have the J.S.I. Deepaks and Anand and you, and so many who have come. And so we have started seeing light at the end of the tunnel. One thing that I would like to just speak loudly is, we have seen that in the West recently, the universities were taken over by the leftists and the utopists. Now, the Jews were at the receiving end, and of course they are at the receiving end. We Hindus are also at the receiving end, and we see ignorant industrialists, businessmen from India financing people, as he rightly put across, institutions and people who are inimical to Hindu interests. Now, how to counter this? Can we not the Indian academicians and align with Jewish academicians? Can we not align as the leftists and the Islamists are aligned all over the world, in every sphere? In fact, we have seen that even in India today. Not today, it was always there, but then it has come right to the surface. Post 2014, they become more brazen now, coming together. Can we not, the Indian academicians and the Jewish intellectuals and the businessmen and industrialists in America come together, and so that the interest of both the these communities, both the Jewish as well as the Indian communities. I'm not saying that the Jewish community is at the receiving end for the last. They also have got a history of so many conquests and they have run away. Similarly, the Indians too. So how can we counter that? One, can we not align? If you are doing it, please enlighten the people here in the auditorium. Second, since we are a structured society, how can we, and you are a professor of mass media and media studies, how can we, being a structured society, counter the others through unstructured ways? I'm talking about fake and propaganda and all those things. It is something that Dharmic people, we have got a very big problem. Because we are bound by laws, bound by culture, bound by righteousness and all those things. But we are not bound by anything. People inimical to us, they are not bound by anything. For them, nothing matters. They just break any law. Whereas we have to remain within the law. So laws are for us. How can we, within our structured society, counter the others? And can we ever counter the others through an unstructured manner? Can we anything, construct something which is unstructured? And I know it is publicly, I mean it is not very digestible to talk about those things. But can something be done in the media study, in the media apparatus also? Thank you.
I'll try and answer this quickly, sir. Thank you for your questions. Very, very quickly, I think the future is local. The future prospects of Hindu survival are local, traditional, micro traditional. I think what has happened is in the last 10 years, this social media, YouTube, Twitter, renaissance that you spoke of, and I'm absolutely humbled and thrilled that this book has played some small part in that, has been a mixed blessing. It's a double-edged sword. Particularly social media has been a double-edged sword for Hindus because people get excited by the fact that there's more information going around, there's some charismatic speakers and all these things. But because I'm a media researcher, I can tell you social media has been used more to control Hindu uprising, Hindu self-expression, Hindu recognition of realities in the last 10 years. So that is something we should be aware of. The problem now with propaganda is not just New York Times or Slumdog Millionaire or American universities being bought off by Qatar, which is well documented now. The problem is also that the only space Hindus seem to have now is Twitter, WhatsApp and YouTube, where a lot of influential actors can easily put their thumb down and suppress truth from coming out. So I would just say be wary about social media as the real world. Institutional realities are what we need, and as Sai and Anand spoke in the book launch in Delhi, that has simply not happened. It seems to be a fate that neither our political leaders nor business leaders or even community leaders have ever thought of the importance of institutional education. It doesn't have to be in a big university. I mean, there are many Hindu organizations in America. I would love to, and they're all talking about how worried they are about their children, and once they go to college, they'll be brainwashed or they'll become anti-Hindu. I said, I'm happy to speak, but they don't follow me. Because they're not in the business of actually preparing their children for what is ahead. They're in the business of community tamasha. Okay, I'm the leader of the community. I have 50 people who come and say, show us the way. So I'm not mentioning anyone in particular. I think everybody is a mixed bag, But, so that is what I want to say. Be wary of this push towards leadership making rather than Hindu children training. I think that is the one challenge we have. The other challenge is also we need to recognize that we don't really have an Indian-rooted Westology, right? That we need to have, and it is there, a little bit is there in the sense, I think the Voice of India books are monumental. S.N. Balgangadhar's books those of his students are very useful. I've also found some of the Native American writings, particularly those of Mighty Loria, very, very helpful in understanding the phenomenon of how the West, especially the Christian or post-Christian West, thinks of the world and how it acts the way it does. So we, I think, need to recognize it. Like you said, we have these holes. We have the holes in our own knowledge, which we are trying to fill now. We are learning Sanskrit and all these things. That's wonderful. We absolutely should encourage that. But we also need to recognize, I don't think Indian knowledge systems or Indian knowledge systems had a well thought out engagement or critique of these religions in the past, or these people who came in. Right? It's a very new thing. Whereas on the other hand, the monotheistic, expansive monotheistic faiths, it's a part of their package. Their book tells them every person in the world has already been explained in their book. So whether it could be the Bible, it could be Darwin, it could be social science, it could be Marx, it could be anybody's book. But they are already prepared to fit us into their theory, into their story. And for us, I think we are maybe a generation or two away from bringing the two together. And we just have to keep doing that. The other point you mentioned about alliances and things like that, aligning with the Jewish community and all that is a question again for community leaders. I don't think for me, I'm equipped, frankly, but I will point out that a lot of the anti-Hindu tropes and stereotypes do come from anti-Semitism. So that is very useful to recognize. But beyond that, I think there's building alliances and all that, I don't know. Again, see, the problem is in the words, the problem is in the stories, in the theories, in academia, in media, in culture, and what you tell your children. And the solutions, inevitably, we keep thinking, what can governments do, what can elites do? So, I think we have to focus more and more on the stories and narratives themselves. At least that's my domain, so I'll stop.
Good evening, sir. First, I was in such the talk in the people way. And thanks for coming and showing sharing your thoughts. In the background, giving what I am, I will not read these books and not go into details in all these areas. Simple questions I would like to know from you is, being an auditor also, what is the action point if you ask 2 or 3 which we as people who can understand that what you are trying to say, but at the same time are left with no concrete road to follow on. Just 2 or 3 bullet points which we could take it as just as a takeaway from this discussion, this one. And the second is also, I just wanted to say that the title of the book is saying Rearming Hinduism. I got the feeling that we are already heavily armed in that sense. I didn't mean the spiritual part, but I think we are armed, we are already like a violent people with a lot of swords and talwars and whatnot, and we are trying to gain, rearm them to get fight it out. I don't know whether that's the right meaning. I am getting it from the title. It just may be new to you. And the third part I wanted to say, in a diabolical society like India, there are a lot of Hindus. And within the Hindu, there are believers and non-believers. Within the Hindu, there are people who are believing in the God-fearing, etc., and others who do not. So how do we sort of percolate this message of reviving the Hinduism part? It is easy for people like us who are God-fearing, who visit the temple every week, for example, and then do our part. We believe that we can say something about God to our children, etc., to propagate that message. But what about other side, other group of people who are also Hindus, non-Hindus, no doubt, but they are no sayers as far as belief in the God and other things are concerned. So that's a sort of a difficult area for challenge. Is what I want to say.
So the last part you were asking was Hindus who don't believe in God.
Yes, yes. So we have a mixed bag in India. You know, there are many people who do not believe about gods and this, and they don't even go to the temple. But they are Hindus. So how do we transfer? How do we put these thoughts across to them, or how they in turn will take it to their the next generation? This is a 3 points. We can make it very difficult. There is already a line waiting here. So just give me 3 bullet points, and the title of the book, and the third point is how do we do this with big mixed bag.
Okay, I'll try. Yeah, I know. Okay, rearming is the easiest one. I'll start with that. In my book, I said rearming is a pun on Narasimha Swami's missing arm. Because I'm a writer, I said, it's like we are trying to write our story, we don't have a hand. So it was a pun on the arm. But it also suggests arms as in a Kshatriya spirit. And I think I do want to encourage people to feel empowered and courageous and to fight. It's just that I don't know anything about fighting because I'm not a soldier. But I understand the battlefield in terms of academia and media and propaganda. So that is the battlefield I want people to know how to fight, whether it is in social media or YouTube videos or conversations with your children or your children's teachers. It's very important to know what to say and what not to say. And hopefully this book, especially the first part, gives you a map of how academics are looking at this, so that today I think one of the biggest problems in India, again earlier I said social media is a double-edged sword. A lot of modern Indians, whether they're patriotic Indians or Hindus, devout Hindus or atheist Hindus, have been left confused by the deluge that is social media. Right? We pick up talking points from one person who's talking about temple rights, one person who says he's an atheist but a cultural Hindu, one person who says Operation Olympics and that operation is a fake in America, but then in India it is real. Somebody else will say the opposite. So social media is like that. Your algorithm, your phone is showing you a bunch of stuff. You don't have the clarity. Whereas a propaganda system, whether it is Indology or South Asia studies or Hollywood or JDO or whoever, any humanities, they're very clear about what they're saying. Hindus today are all over the place. So to answer the question about the atheist, non-atheist, it's just my little submission. I've been thinking about it the last few days. Why is the word Hindu used for somebody? Because I have a chapter here called The Myth of a Hindu View of History Without a Hindu View of God. So generally when you use the word Hindu, at least the way I used to use it, you refer to something to do with the deity. Right? There's a God, you believe or you pray to that God, and then that is Hinduism. But when somebody says they don't believe in that or they're atheist or something, then call yourself an Indian. Call yourself a culturally rooted Indian, that or Bharatiya, whatever, that is fine. But I just find it strange, and the last 5 years or so, that has been encouraged a lot in the social media space, where you have people who claim to be cultural Hindus, right-wing Hindus, but you don't really sit this whole museum stuff to them. So I'm not in that space. I'm, for lack of a better word, I know it's a Western concept, but I'm a believer. And that will take you I'll get to the actual points now. Now, I mentioned this simple summary in my Delhi talk inspired by my panelists, and that is 5 M's, First is movies, maybe I would just say media. So look at media as a weapon that is coming at the future of Hinduism. Okay? It could be movies, it could be journalism, whatever, and say this is the war right now. 200 years ago somebody came and actually broke a temple. Now they don't have to do that. They are reshaping your mind, they're reshaping the mind of your children. Even some of the people who use the word Hindu are reshaping your mind in an antithetical way. So media is the first one. The second one, I would say, is mom and dad. Parents, I think we have to focus on Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma within the space of our own memories. Try and convey to your children whatever your parents said about their childhood, where they went for pilgrimage, everything you can. Because, I mean, look at a movie like Kantara, for example, right? It is entirely about the memory of generational tradition being passed on. That's why everyone loved that movie. And then from Kantara, the third thing, in M I said Manadevulu, that is our gods. You know, ultimately it is about our deities. In my book, there is no Hinduism without deities. And it's not about belief. Again, belief is either a modern concept or more of a, I think, Christian, Islamic, monotheistic concept. It is for us about tradition, practice, ritual, experience, knowledge. So my God, so our gods, and the last action item. So movies, parents, gods, and the fourth item I want to say, because in Telugu it would come with M, Muga Jivulu, which means mute lives, or animals, nature, non-human world. I think the whole world will immediately recognize who we are really the moment we realize we're the last culture left on earth. Now we may have some traditions which do bali, some traditions, some communities which eat meat, don't eat meat, that's all fine. Nobody should judge somebody else. But we are the last surviving memory of a world before dominionism, a world before speciesism and anthropocentrism. Okay? So when we still have a Narasimha and a Ganesha and a Hanuman, and so many signs coming to us, like when we go and put the rice ball for our ancestors and the crow comes and eats it. That happened to me right here in Bombay 6 months ago for my father's annual ceremony. We are moved profoundly by something in existence which nobody can explain. So that mystery, that awe of being part of a cosmos beyond the human, beyond the ego, I think that is also a part of the action item. So these are the conversations we should have, the 4 M's.
Namaste sir, I'm Hiti, I'm doctoral researcher in Sanskrit at IIT Bombay. So I had a question that when people like Wendy Donegan or Shredded Pollock, they take personal attacks on us, on our culture, can't there be some laws which will prohibit them from doing such things? Just like we have human rights, similarly this is the right of a particular cultural identity, and that is being tackled. So can't we have such laws which will stop people from writing such masterpieces? So just like there's a sense of good, can there be some authority will control these people? And can that be a part of destiny? Most important.
The short answer, no, I think it's next to impossible, because our community has not built the arguments for anything like that. See, whatever law you want, right, it could be a wonderful law, let's say, to protect animals, or a law which says, 100 acres around every ancient Punya Kshetra like Sabrimala or Tirumala or Hampi should not be developed or destroyed. Or a law which says the Himalayas can't be turned into tourism sites. That any law we want needs arguments in the culture. And in the last 10 years, those arguments have not been built. I mean, the arguments are forming, but mostly in this very unstructured way. And it's very interesting, you said, yeah, you're right. We are a very orderly, law-abiding, conformist community. And the problem is we are not able to organize all these impulses and ideas into building arguments, changing stories for anything. I don't think necessarily we need censorship, but we can build stories which become more effective and powerful so that people will think twice before insulting us. Nobody thinks twice. The people have been incentivized to insult us. Right? I don't know if you remember Sai's quote from the book Talk in Delhi. It says, right, the idea now is, you please and co-opt the jihadi and you demonize the Brahmin. So you have a political establishment now which says the same thing that the so-called left has been saying all these years. So that's what happens when you have a narrative vacuum, when you have an intellectual vacuum. the other person's stories become your own. So I don't think we have anywhere close to doing anything that effective. We can't. I mean, the last part of the book where I summarized 10 years of Hinduphobia, I gave the examples, and when people in authority don't talk about Hindus as people having human rights, why will the opponents do it for us? Right? When the Nupur Sharma tragedy happened, when the tailors were being murdered and Nupur Sharma got into trouble with that, fatwa or whatever was, informal fatwa was put on her, somebody should have just spoken up and said, look, these are the facts of the issue. Instead, she was called a fringe. Right? The spokesman of the ruling party was called a fringe by the Ministry of External Affairs. So when people are thrown under the bus, not the people, the truth is thrown under the bus. Okay? There is no record. There is no record. I mean, the plight of the Jews in America is very similar to ours. And the Jews, at least for 50, 60 years, put millions into Holocaust studies, building Holocaust museums, all these things. But generational collapses happened there. Right? They don't have any. I mean, most of my understanding is most of the Jewish scholars in Judaic studies or in academia are quote unquote anti-Zionist. So they don't really, feel the pain that some of the other Jews, I think, are feeling with what is happening, or what Hindus are feeling about what's happening to Jews. So I think when we lose the arguments, when we don't keep the memory alive. When we don't keep a paper trail, as they say, we don't keep a record of things that are happening to us, about lies which have been said to us, then nothing gets done. So there were riots in Leicester, in UK, right, a couple of years ago. Only a handful of people who follow, Hindu activists or Op India or Upward knew exactly what was going on. The lies that the people there were saying, the Western media was saying. Most of my friends, Hindu friends in America, would listen to National Public Radio, BBC, and say, no, but in Leicester, the Hindutva people provoked, they did something wrong. So that is how it is. The majority opinion in our community, the Hindu community, is the propaganda opinion. Because now the propaganda is coming from two places, not just the left. So I think those kind of solutions are not feasible, but the fact that we are thinking of a future where the lies will stop, the hatred will stop, that is commendable. So let us work on the building blocks towards that, starting with our own Vak Shakti, and also our own family spaces. I think intergenerational communication is the most important.
Sir, I have one question. Before that, there is a books available here. Whoever want to purchase, you can take it from there. So my question is basically we are talking, from last almost more than 1 hour regarding this rearming, correct? So I got it that this rearming is basically based on academia, right? And this is a very important, very important aspect where the rearming should happen. But do you think that whatever we want, all of you we want, okay, collectively, that will be only achievable by the academia and
Achievable by the
academia. I mean, rearming the education and all those things. Intelligence, Indian intelligence, right? So, do you think that this is only achievable by this? And if it is, then what do you think the challenges are? Because, as being an Indian here, Bharti, there are, there are many challenges in Bharat only that we can't do whatever we say, right? We have in our manas, we have in our, hriday, in our heart, but we can't do everything because of the maybe several things are there. The government, the public, constitution, and many things are there, right? So what do you think the challenges reviving or the rearming, Hinduism?
Thank you. No, I don't think academia is going to be the motor of history. Academia and media are major sources of one of the biggest problems we have, because academia and media have a monopoly on the stories that are being told to us. And now social media is also playing a role, but it's a mixed role, as I said, I would say it's 50-50 maybe. I think we just have to be very clear on what is Hinduism here. And again, if Hinduism is just another word for constitution, if people want to make a god of constitution, why call it Hinduism? I have nothing against the constitution. I mean, that's the norm of our time. We'll work with it, we'll follow the democratic process. But I think the real key element in rearming is clinging to the feet of the gods. Let the bhakti come, let the bhakti become Shakti. Whether it is Vak Shakti or other forms of Shakti, that is for each of us to figure out and do it that way. But it can be done. I think we have to get over this fear. Just a small observation on Indian psychology, I noticed social psychology in America, particularly on this Hindu activism issue. In America, at least, I've noticed. We swing between foolish bravado and unnecessary cowardice. Okay? I've seen this a lot. And some of it has to do with, again, our being a very conformist society, especially those of us who are living abroad. When we are isolated, I think we become very quiet, or we just erupt on internet behind anonymity, but we don't go and talk to people in our office. We won't challenge our HR and say, hey, why is there a Hindu-phobic example? Fine, if you want to teach about Islamophobia, I have no problem, but why don't you have an example about Hindu-phobia? I told my university's HR in the past, because when they have that usual HR training for employees, one of the examples they train you on is something called conversion therapy. So if you are an employee in an American company, and I'm sure it's the case whether you're working for Microsoft or Google or anybody, they will train you and tell you that you should not tell somebody that they should go for conversion therapy if they happen to be gay or lesbian. So I said, fine, that is fine, we should support everybody's freedom, but why don't you have an example of conversion therapy protection for Hinduism, right? If somebody in your office comes and tells you, why are you keeping these gods, that superstition or that is oppression, why don't you convert to my religion or convert to atheism or something? That should be something HR, you should be able to tell human resources to look at it and say, hey, this person is violating my identity as a Hindu. So we can say these things, but I think the problem is our imagination is narrowed because we depend on group strength alone. So in America, what happens is when Hindus gather on the weekend, they get very courageous, they'll shout, they'll feel like, we're doing something. Next day in office, we all become weak. So we have to learn to be individually rearmed and within the family. And I think intergenerational communication, again, you talking to your elders, you talking to your children, like the song they sang. I will never forget it because they may even not know the full import of what they've done. But for two small children to get up on a stage and bravely sing and talk about something heroic that their ancestors, my ancestors, all our ancestors know as the greatest example of heroism, Krishna and Arjuna, Mahabharata. I mean, it's all there within us. I think for too long we've been group-centered. I think we need to be more individual and more family-centered. That's my rearming formula. And God-centered.
Yeah, very, positive.
I suppose that others also have some questions, so they ask after this session. So we have to conclude this Q&A session now. Those who have questions can ask after this session. When we complete this session today. Thank you, Professor Chirani, for your brief description of all the questions were asked by the audience. We had also the presence of Sri Saurabh Shahji, who is also a prominent writer, written a book on Ayodhya to Bodha, which is also about the an important issue of Ram Mandir, and then what happened with the car sales being burned in a train in Bodha. So I request him to express his views also on this topic about the rearming of Hindus.
Book you have written, I just got it yesterday from Amazon. When going through this book, I had two very small questions for you. I'm from a media. How do we rearm our readers for Hinduism and against the Hindu phobia? Number one, very small thing. Number two, as we see the younger generation of Indians, say these kids are there. They are fortunate to have a very good father, very good tradition in their family. But most of the kids in our society, between 5 to 10 years, they are nurtured into wokeism, especially the teenagers. So how do we rearm them? I would just like to ask these two questions, please.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'd love to read your book because both Ayodhya and Godhra and the way they were systematically misrepresented in the Western media, I think was one of the wake-up points for me as a media researcher. Because for a very long time, I just assumed that whatever they were writing was okay. But then I think I began to get rearmed because I used my knowledge as a media critic to realize that something horrible had happened in Godhra. And they were all being vague about it, like, they were making tea and something happened, accident happened. So I think the quickest answer I can give you is, one, how do we rearm readers? Again, think of your ability. I've been talking so far about the word as something you utter. But I think we also need to become good readers. That's a very good point you mentioned. So let us appreciate Vak-Shakti not only in what we are about to say, but also in what Vagdevi is giving to us. Okay? So when a word is coming to us, it could be in a book or from a good orator, let us dwell on each word, because that is how our ancestors learned, right? So I think we need to learn in a way again, pay attention to words, and I forgot what else. I think Oh, the kids about wokeism. Okay. Actually, I wrote a piece in First Post recently. I think again, see, the problem is when we use a word called wokeism, we have already lost our children because they think it's a bad word that right-wing, rich people, upper caste people, or white supremacists use. Let us take what they're thinking. They are thinking about the issue of inequality. So in my article, I said, let us drop the word wokeism. Let's just say, okay, you're concerned, you're a young kid, you're worried about inequality in the world. So let us look at inequality as it really exists. And then when you look at the textbooks, or you look at economics, or you look at religious bias, I think the truth will prevail. So I would say, the best way to answer that is to meet them halfway and talk about inequality and show them where they are being misused or where they are being misled.
Dhanyawad Saurabh for your question on this topic. So now we are moving ahead for the Abhinandana of our distinguished speaker, Professor Manisha Jiludi. So I request Sandeep ji to bring and also request Saurabh ji to felicitate our speaker here. I think house should not be silent. धन्यवाद सौरभ जी. Now I request now I request Shri Sunil Gopinathan ji to felicitate Shri Saurabh Shah ji. धन्यवाद सुनील जी. So today's program was organized by IIT B for Bharat along with Kerala Kshetra Paripalakan Kendra Samiti Maharashtra. So now I request Shri Sandeep Kumar Vishnu to come forward and tell us about the IIT B for Bharat, its work and how it is contributing for the larger awareness of Hindus in Mumbai.
Namaste to everyone. ITB for Bharat, लगभग यहाँ पर बैठे हुए सभी लोगों को इसकी जानकारी नहीं होगी. बैनर पर आप देख सकते हैं सामने ITB फॉर भारत लिखा हुआ है. ITB फॉर भारत IIT बॉम्बे के स्टूडेंट्स का एक समूह है. इसकी शुरुआत कैसे हुई थी, कैसे इसका आरंभ हुआ था, ये थोड़ा सा मैं आपको ब्रीफ करता हूँ, बहुत अधिक समय नहीं लूँगा. 2019 में जब CA और NRC ये दो कानून भारत सरकार लेकर के आ रही थी, तो IIT बॉम्बे में बहुत अधिक जो है वो जमात हुआ था, जो कि नहीं होना चाहिए था. किसी भी इंस्टीट्यूट के एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन को ये ध्यान रखना होता है या करना चाहिए. मैं यहाँ से अपना जजमेंट नहीं सुना रहा हूँ, परंतु किसी भी इंस्टीट्यूट का ये कार्य होता है कि वहाँ पर अध्ययन के अतिरिक्त और कोई गतिविधियाँ ना हो, परंतु ऐसा हुआ नहीं. लगभग 1 महीने से अधिक इंस्टीट्यूट के अंदर रैलियाँ चलती रहीं, भाषण चलते रहे, धपलियाँ बजती रहीं और छात्रों का जो नुकसान है अध्ययन का वो होता रहा. और IIT बॉम्बे एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन देख रहा था, सब देख रहे थे, सब चल रहा था. कोई भी उसको रोकने के लिए या रोकने आने के लिए सक्षम नहीं था, या सक्षम थे तो पता नहीं क्यों ऐसा हुआ नहीं. उसमें प्रोफेसर भी इन्वॉल्व थे, स्टूडेंट्स भी इन्वॉल्व थे और IIT बॉम्बे के स्टाफ भी इन्वॉल्व थे. इस तरह की गतिविधियां जहां पर छात्र पढ़ाई छोड़ करके एक महीने तक इस तरह की चीजें कर रहे हैं, ये एजुकेशन मिनिस्ट्री, गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया को भी देखने की आवश्यकता है कि इस तरह से ना हो. टेक्निकल इंस्टीट्यूट जो कि प्रीमियम इंस्टीट्यूट है, जहाँ पर स्टूडेंट्स परिश्रम करके एडमिशन लेते हैं, वहाँ आकर के इस तरह से देखेंगे और इस तरह से यदि रैलियाँ होंगी जो कि गवर्नमेंट के अगेंस्ट हो रहा था, ये सब अच्छा नहीं है। मैंने देखा है इस कारण से कई लोगों का जो एजुकेशन है वो हार्म हुआ है। कई लोग इस परिस्थिति को नहीं झेल पाए हैं। क्यों? क्योंकि वो, अब आप समझ सकते हैं कि अंदर जब रैलियाँ हो रही हैं तो किस तरह की चीज़ें वहाँ पर हो रही होंगी। ब्राह्मणवाद से हल्ला बोल, मनुवाद से हल्ला बोल, और पता नहीं क्या क्या आप देख सकते हैं। ITV फॉर भारत में भी आपको कई सारी चीज़ें मिल जाएंगी देखने के लिए जो कि उनके द्वारा किया गया था, या उन सबको हमने जो है वो कहीं ना कहीं उल्लेखित किया है। तो इन सब को जब कोई एक छात्र यहाँ पर आकर के पढ़ने के लिए जो आया है वो देखेगा तो उस पर क्या बीतेगी, और ये चीज़ प्रशासन को, जो इंस्टीट्यूट का प्रशासन है, उसको ये बात समझ में नहीं आई। और अल्टीमेटली जब नहीं देखा गया, जब असहन हो गया, तब कुछ लोग सामने आए, छात्र भी थे, प्रोफेसर भी थे और स्टाफ भी था, जिससे ये सब नहीं देखा जा रहा था। किसी आकर के लिए आते थे, कोई भी आकर के IT बॉम्बे का उसके ऊपर, और ना ही मुझे लगता है कोई रोकने के लिए गया। अंततः जब हम लोगों के द्वारा शिकायत की गई तब कहीं जाकर के कुछ रूल जो है वो डायरेक्टर ने दिए और उस पर थोड़ा बहुत प्रतिबंध लगाया। बाद में ऐसी चीज़ें नहीं हुई, लेकिन उस तरह की छोटी मोटी चीज़ें या बड़ी चीज़ें जो है वो होती रही हैं, और IT बॉम्बे प्रशासन ने जैसा उनको दंड देना चाहिए था उस तरह से वो दंड नहीं दे पाए। तो इसके कारण से बहुत सारे बच्चों का जो है वो स्टडी में हार्म होता है। हमने 2019 में ही, या 2020 मैं कहूँगा, जनवरी फरवरी का माह था, और तब हमने जो है वो इस तरह से एक साथ आकर के और उन्हें रोकने, या हम ये कहें कि जो हमें ठीक लगा उसे करने के लिए आगे बढ़े। और तब से ही ये वो व्यक्ति यहाँ पर नहीं है जिन्होंने इसको आरंभ किया, या जिन लोगों ने इसे आरंभ किया वो यहाँ पर नहीं है। मैं एक सदस्य हूँ जो बाद में उसमें जुड़ा, और फिर जो मुझे ठीक लगा वैसा उनके साथ जो है वो कार्यों में लगा रहा। तो हम जुड़े, और उसका कारण था जब सोलंकी करके एक विद्यार्थी हैं, उन्होंने आत्महत्या कर ली थी। तब आपने देखा होगा किस तरह से जातिवाद का नैरेटिव जो है वो लगाया गया, परंतु वो सब गलत निकला। और इसी तरह IT बॉम्बे के कैंपस के अंदर जातिवाद को लेकर के बच्चों को भ्रम में डाला जाता है, उनके माइंड वॉश किए जाते हैं। कुछ ग्रुप्स हैं जो ये काम करते हैं अंदर, और उन पर कोई जो है वो लगाम नहीं है। तो हमने सोचा कि क्यों ना हम आगे आएँ, और हमारे संपर्क में जितने विद्यार्थी आते हैं, हम जितना कार्य कर पाते हैं कैंपस के अंदर, धार्मिक कार्य, वहाँ पर 2 मंदिर हैं, कुछ स्टडी कर सकते हैं, कुछ मिल के कार्यक्रम कर सकते हैं, नए बच्चे आए हैं तो एक दूसरे से परिचय कर सकते हैं, और इस तरह से करके क्यों ना बच्चों से हम संबंध बनाएं, उन्हें इस तरह की ताकतों के पास जाने से रोकें, और जब भी वो हमारे संपर्क में आते हैं तो उन्हें बताएं कि कैसे आप लोगों को भ्रमित किया जा रहा है, और कैसे जो है वो आप गलत मार्ग पर जा रहे हैं। कोई भेदभाव नहीं है, कुछ भी नहीं है। उसके पश्चात भी आपको ब्रेन वॉश किया जा रहा है, और आप लोग जो है भ्रमित होते हैं, और ये भारत को डिवाइड करने का जो है एजेंडा है, हिंदुओं को डिवाइड करने का एजेंडा है। बहुत सारे छात्र, कुछ स्टाफ, कुछ प्रोफेसर के सहयोग से हमने इस ग्रुप को आरंभ किया था, और जो मैंने कार्य बताए उन कार्यों को हम करते रहे। धीरे धीरे हमने इसके मीडिया चैनल्स भी जो है वो ओपन किए, और वहाँ पर जिन भी संबंधित लोगों को, जो भी हमारे कार्यक्षेत्र में आता था, उन लोगों को हम बुला करके और चर्चा करवाने का प्रयास करते थे। छात्रों को वो अटेंड करने के लिए कहते थे। उनके द्वारा कई सारे स्टडी सर्कल जो है वो जहाँ पर बुक्स पढ़ करके और उनको समझने, उनके बारे में विचार करने और डिस्कशन करने के लिए प्रोत्साहित करते थे। और इसी तरह ये यात्रा जो है वो धीरे धीरे आरंभ हो गई, और अभी जो है वो हम आज इस स्थिति में हैं। और भी छात्रों को, प्रोफेसर्स को और स्टाफ्स को इस तरह के कार्यों में, इस तरह की गतिविधियों को आरंभ करने की आवश्यकता है आईटी बॉम्बे एवं अन्य आईटी के अंदर। मैं आईटी बॉम्बे का छात्र हूँ, इसलिए मैं कह सकता हूँ आईटी बॉम्बे के बारे में, बाकी इंस्टीट्यूट के बारे में मुझे नहीं पता, परंतु आईटी बॉम्बे के अंदर ये करने की अत्यंत आवश्यकता है। हमारे छात्रों को यहाँ आने के बाद कई ग्रुप्स हैं जिनके द्वारा भ्रमित किया जाता है और देश के विरोधी एजेंडे पर, हिंदुत्व के विरोधी एजेंडे पर, ब्राह्मणवाद के विरोधी एजेंडे पर, जिसका कोई आधार नहीं है, इन सब एजेंडों पर बच्चों को भ्रमित किया जाता है और वो कहीं ना कहीं उस एजेंडे पर आते हैं और उस पर कार्य भी करते हैं। मुख्यतः जो है वो जो ग्रामीण क्षेत्र से बच्चे आते हैं, सो कॉल्ड जो एससी और एसटी बोला जाता है, सब हमारे भाई हैं, परंतु जो नाम दिया गया मैं वो नाम बता रहा हूँ, दलित जिनको कहते हैं, उन बच्चों को टारगेट किया जाता है और उन्हें इस तरह से ब्रेन वॉश करके गलत कार्यों में जो है वो इंस्टीट्यूट के अंदर लगाया जाता है। तो इस सब कार्यों को रोकने या उन बच्चों को अपने अधीन लाने, उनको धार्मिक शिक्षा देने, धार्मिक कार्यों में एंगेज करने, इन सब के विषय में हम लोग आईटी बॉम्बे के अंदर काम करने का प्रयास करते हैं, आगे भी करते रहेंगे। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद संदीप जी। Now I request Shri Sunil Gopinathan ji, who is the General Secretary of Kerala Kshetra Paripalan Kendra Samiti, Maharashtra, to tell us about the organization and its work.
Namaste. Now we already exceeded our time limit actually, because we have to surrender this place at 7 p.m. as agreed with the temple management committee. Most of are here know about Kerala Kshetra Paripalan Kendra Samiti. It's an apex body of 52 temples across Mumbai, which is running on the Kerala traditional way. We are in Mumbai for last 20 years, and it is an ATG exemption organization. One of our major criteria is to protect the Sanatana Dharma and spread the Sanatana Dharma to elders, especially for the youth and the children. Last, I think we all know, Narayanam is now across Mumbai, spread in all the temples. The force behind spreading Narayana in almost all the temple is KKKS. Because KKKS is used to conduct Narayana competition every year and giving Narayaniam classes online and offline in most of the various temples across Mumbai. The upcoming event of KKKS is on August 18th. We are conducting Narayaniam competition for the children from age 4 to 21. This is the second year we are conducting. Last year we are conducted on this temple premises, and there were 87 children are participated. And this year we are conducting at Nerul temple, and we are expecting nearly about 100 children will participate this year. And our focus is to build a Narayaniya children group in another 1 or 2 years, and we will be aiming to conduct a Narayaniya Mahotsav in Guruvayur in the upcoming years. That is our plan. The next agenda we are planning to take up is on across all the temples of Maharashtra is Vishnu Sahasranamam. Because this particular temple in this year, last couple of years we are doing it, successfully conducted Vishnu Sahasranamam very well. That is another agenda we are taking it up to for the KKS agenda. Along with we are providing medical aidance, we are providing aidance for the children, those who are from our Hindu community, and we are providing shelters
for the poor people, those who are coming for that. And across all, because we are registered under charity also. So that's why every year we used to do charity within our capacity, and we used to continue our charity programs. Now we are looking for a place. We don't have an office now. What we are looking is, right now we are operating under Minisabarimala temple. Now we are looking for an office, and I believe Jagadishwaran will help us to come out with a building before 2025 March. That is our aim, and we look forward all support for KKKS to do such kind of activity in the upcoming years. And now I would like to thank IITBV for Bharat to allowing us to co-hosting this such a wonderful evening, because there is only hardly 52 people are attended this function. But I believe this was a wonderful productive section. Instead of having 1,000 people came over here, and he just concluding his speech, and there is no question is coming, and there is no answer session is coming, then that kind of a meeting there is no use at all. So here what I observed, the audience was excellent audience. We have received a very good question from the audience. That's why he is able to answer all the question very effectively. That kind of interaction we required instead of gathering 1,000 people and nothing to do with that actually. Thank you once again. Thank you everyone for coming all the way, and thank you sir for joining with us. Thank you very much.
Dhanyawad, Sunilji. Now I request Dr. Yash Prasadji for concluding today's program with a Dhanyawad Prastav, along with his works in Powai. One movement that he is currently running is Sahasramukhe Sanskritam. That is a very wonderful initiative that he started last year. Even a year before, he started the non-formal Sanskrit cell to be established at IIT Bombay, which is very well running. And today was the last date when the exams were over. And I hope 100 plus students have been graduated today who have attended this 2-year program here. So Dr. A.S. Prasadji will tell us about the Sanskriti, and then after he will give the Dhanyawad Prastav of today's program.
मम ध्वनिः श्रूयते किम्? ऑडिबल वा? अस्तु। अहं किञ्चित् संस्कृतेनैव वदामि। सहस्रमुखेषु संस्कृतम् इति महोदयः अभिषेक महोदयः उक्तवान्। सहस्रमुखेषु संस्कृतम् इति कार्यक्रमः कः इति अहं वदामि किञ्चित्। अस्माकं पवै मध्ये, पवै इति पुण्यस्थानमेव। अत्र अय्यप्पा मन्दिरस्य द्वयम् अय्यप्पा मन्दिरम् अस्ति अत्र। पवै मध्ये एकं मन्दिरं, द्वितीयम् अस्ति अत्र समीपे एव कञ्जूर् मार्ग् मध्ये अस्माकम् अय्यप्पा मन्दिरम् अस्ति। इत्युक्ते पवै मध्ये मन्दिरद्वयम् अस्ति, बहु विशेषस्थानमेव। शबरिमला केरला विहाय अय्यप्पं स्वामेः प्रथमप्रतिष्ठा केरलात् बहिः, केरलायाः बहिः अस्माकं पवै कञ्जूर् मार्ग् अस्माकं मन्दिरे अभवत्। Our temple in Kanjur Marg, we've got historical records for that from pre-independence era of 1945, which means it is the first Ayyappa temple outside of Kerala. Outside of Kerala, so it's a that's not dissimilar to other temples. There are 2 temples in Powai. Now, why am I saying this? Immediately after the Supreme Court verdict regarding the Sabarimala temple and the controversy about which Professor Vamsi ji is also following. So I've read some of his books and also some of his articles and talks on the YouTube, etc. This was the first temple where all the representatives from all the Ayyappa temples, around 50 of them, came here to this hall to protest against that movement. And one of the members from this temple movement is also one of the petitioners to the Supreme Court to change the verdict, which has now gone to the Constitution bench. Because in our country's history, if 3 judges cannot decide, then they will give it to 5 judges. If 5 judges cannot decide, then they will give to 10 judges. So right now it's in that state Supreme Court, but we are absolutely sure about the verdict, which will be in favor of the Hindu faith seekers. Okay, I don't call it believers because that's a very monotheistic word. Coming to this, I really want to thank IIT for Bharat, a group of youngsters, Sandeep, Abhishek, Govind, Aditya, and others here, who have organized this program along with the Kerala Kshetra Paripalana Kendra Samiti. And I also thank Ayyappa Mandir, this particular temple and their trustees, for trusting us and giving us the space to conduct this program. And Sunil also already talked about Kerala Kshetra Paripalana Kendra Samiti. It is called Kerala Kshetra Paripalana Samiti, but we stand for Sanatana Dharma. And it did not take not more than 2 minutes for us to decide to co-host this program along with IIT for Bharat in this temple, because whatever he was talking about is what we are actually trying to do. Okay, so Mahodaya talked about, first of all, to me, it is an absolute surprise that an American University social science professor is talking a lot about Hinduism. Okay, and is a staunch believer in Hinduism. The same woke culture is what we are seeing in Indian universities also. So wherever there are humanities department in Indian institutes, whether it is JNU or whether it is around IITs or whether it is around IIT Bombay, these are all, the migration of that kind of woke culture is happening here. But there are a group of young, spirited youngsters who are trying to defend Hinduism in the campus, and this is part of that. Okay, so Mahodaya talked about media, mom and dad and how do we instill that culture. Somebody's question about how do we do that for next generation. We are a group of parents here who are living that culture. So we believe in 5 things. There is Bhasha, okay? So we all talk Madhu Bhasha in our homes, no change Sanskrit. Okay? So Bahavaha Atra Mata Pitarha Sandhi Ye Grihe Idani Powai Madhyeva Samskritena Vadanti. At the end of 2024 in December, Asmadam Powai Madhye Sahasra Janaha, 1,000 people Bhavishyanti Ye Samskritena Vadanti. This is one of our biggest programs right now. So there is Bhasha, there is Bhushan. Okay? So we don't have to wear the factory workers' dress of jeans. Okay? We can wear our own Bharatiya Vesha, and it is a statement. So when we wear the Bharatiya Vesha and we move around, people will see us, and that's a statement. So Bhasha, Bhushanam, which is what we wear. Bhajanam, okay? So Bhajanam is about everyday Nama Sankirtan at your home with children, however much it is possible. And we also have in this temple. So this temple is a great living example. It's a learning center for Sanatana Dharma. So there is Narayani, there is Bhagavatam, there are Sanskritam classes here every Wednesday, 7:30 to 8:30. It's absolutely free. Every Wednesday, 7:30 to 8:30, Sanskritam classes, spoken Sanskritam in this temple. Okay? And every Saturday, after Deeparayana, after 7:15, there is a bhajan for 2 hours, and there is Mahaprasadam after that, and that program has been running for the last 2 years. So every Saturday, so please come to this temple, be part of the bhajana activity, at least once a week. So I talked about Bhasha, I talked about Bhushanam, I talked about Bhajana, and then there is Bhojana. Okay? Bhojana is about eating together at home. At least once a day, if the parents and the children can get together and eat at home together, it's important. You talk things, and that's the way you can build your culture. It's in that conversation a lot of culture building is formed. And sometimes in one of his talks, Mahodaya talks about the West is on a free fall. Okay, we don't have to copy the West. What is good for the West is not what is good for the rest of the world. We have a thriving civilization. We are the oldest civilization. The West is on a free fall, and every civilization is one generation away from extinction. It's just one generation away from extinction. So whose responsibility is to help the civilization thrive for next thousands of years, the responsibility is with us. Okay, so Bhasha, Bhajanam, Brahmanam, Bhojanam, and the last one is Brahmana. Okay, Brahmana is about in my childhood, I haven't read any religious textbooks, but my parents used to go to the temple on a daily basis. Seeing that, you also go. So we need to do that. We need to go to the temple, take our children to the temple, and if we constantly do that, that is culture building. That is culture building. And automatically, as they grow up, they will continue this culture. And that's what we can do for our next generation. So Bhasha, Bhajan, Brahmanam, Bhojanam, and Bhusha. These are 5 things which I thought, the English version of it is what you said, but I thought this is the Sanskrita version of it. I've got so many points noted down in the last 2 hours of conversation, but then I will not range about all of that. But a range of topics have been discussed here, from California textbooks and how they have removed the word India itself. They don't talk about India. They talk about the post-colonial India. They don't talk about the 10,000 years of history of India in any of the American textbooks. But change is happening. They don't talk about the word India itself. It's only in 2016 because of people like Mahodaya and their kind of movement that the word otherwise was called South Asia. Anything good is South Asia and anything bad is India. So that's the way it is in the US. So it's changing. You talked about propaganda movies. You also touched upon Aryan invasion, debunking the Aryan theory, how in the US universities the left and wokeism culture is thriving now and it is slowly coming to India. You also talked about what Rekha ji is doing in Bangalore. So we are already doing that, but in a small way. So we have a Balagokulam here. And all of our children who are it's basically for children from Kerala, they also write and read Malayalam. So that's something we're trying to teach them in a very young format here. And we want to extend that to other parts of other regions of Bharat also. And then, so Hindu parenting is very important. Some of us are living it, but this is something where it's very, very important. Otherwise, we will just lose all this. And as Mahodaya said in one of his earlier talks, we are just one generation away from an extinction of our civilization. So thank you, IITB Bharat, Kerala Kshetra Paribalana Kendra Samiti, this temple trustees, Saurabh Mahodaya, who for coming over here, and all of you here who have come over here to attend to this conversation. As Sunil said, 50 people is what we have, 50-55 people. But that is good enough. If each one of us can be proponents of our Hindu culture, and the book is all about rearming India. So please get the book, read it, and then please keep coming for our programs like this. Dhanyawad. We have the temple Deeparayana that is starting in under 5 minutes. So please go, please visit the temple. Who were not come here before, see the Deeparayana and then we can discuss. Thank you.
Dhanyawad Prasad ji. There is a slogan in Sanskrit. Uttaram yat samudrasya himadreshchaiva dakshinam varsham tad bharatam nam bharati yatra santatihi. So we have to remember the name because that also reflects our thought and thought process. So Bharat is the name which was used during the G20 meeting by the government of India, and there was a huge criticism that the government received then after. And we should think about it. There is no such thing like calling it India every time. You can also call it as Bharat, whatever we feel, and that's how we can also have the pride of our own motherland. The connection that we feel comes through the name, which is correctly pronounced as Bharatam or Bharat. So now the program is about to end, and we'll just stand up and recite one shloka, and I will say a part of it, and then we can follow that. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah. Sarve santu niramayah. Sarve santu niramayah. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu. मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति।